We acknowledge the First Nations people as the traditional custodians of the land we are on today. We acknowledge and pay respect to all elders past, present and emerging.
The Now and the Future podcast is an exciting way of sharing members' stories of opportunities, challenges, and provide support and expert advice for Down syndrome community.
Down syndrome Queensland's vision is to support, advocate for, empower people with Down syndrome to take their rightful places as valuable and contributing members of their community both now and into the future.
Today's episode on safeguarding regarding boundaries comes with somewhat of a trigger warning. We are very conscious that talking about relationships and navigating things like sexuality and puberty and abuse and neglect for a loved one with a disability can be very confronting for anyone. And we would like to encourage you to reach out to the support services team here at Down Syndrome Queensland following this episode should you wish to discuss any of this further. So today's topic is one that some families may find a little bit confronting. It's not exactly a topic that is, I guess, dinner table conversation for very many people. And in fact, it may not even be something that they feel confident or comfortable discussing with friends or family or other people in their lives. But it is one that we in the support services team here at DSQ do hear from families and people with Down syndrome about quite regularly. And that is navigating personal safety within the context of relationships. And by relationships, we don't mean necessarily interpersonal or intimate relationships. We can also consider boundaries within the scope of any interactions that we have with any of the people in our life. So today we're going to hear from a couple of different speakers. Shortly, we'll be talking with Yuka Yamaoka, who is our long-term youth and adult officer within the support services team. And then later in the episode, we'll also hear from one of our peer leaders, Niky, who'd like to share her learnings along the way as she has navigated the relationships and the people in her life. One of the reasons that we do want to talk about this topic today is that we do know that people with a disability are statistically more vulnerable when it comes to exploitation, abuse, neglect, and all of those kinds of areas that it can be very uncomfortable and confronting to think about as a family member, but important nonetheless to ensure that we prepare our loved ones as much as possible. And I guess that's why we have referred to today's episode as safeguarding around boundaries, because it is very hard to proactively support our loved ones in learning strategies and ways that they can maintain those boundaries without acknowledging that they are more at risk in the first place. So welcome, Yuka.
Thank you, Tanya.
I wondered if you wanted to just give a really brief rundown of the role that you do here and the kind of support you provide.
Mm-hmm. So I guess my role as the Youth and Adult Support Officer is to obviously support our youth and adults with Down syndrome, but we also support anyone that's supporting that person. So whether that be family members, service providers, employers, anyone that might be in that person's support network, a range of different inquiries that we get. So one of those things being relationships, puberty, sexuality, all of those tricky things that we might sort of navigate through life and be supporting our person with Down syndrome through.
And I guess you use the word tricky, and certainly I think a lot of people, it's just not one of those things that many of us have been raised speaking very openly about. And I wondered if there's, I guess, why that might be and why that's particularly so when we're talking about a person with a disability.
Yeah, I think, the reason why I use the word tricky is because, we sort of have these conversations with our other children in terms of those without a disability, but I guess parents might perceive it to be tricky because of the fact that they might need to adapt some of that information so it is accessible to their son or daughter, which is a lot of times the case, I guess. We want to make sure that the information that we're providing to the person with Down syndrome, that it's going to be, consolidated and making sure that they understand what it is that they need to know in terms of being able to, navigate their way through puberty and sexuality and relationships. So, and a lot of the times family members may find it difficult to have those conversations because the information that we're providing to our person with Down syndrome can be quite explicit. We need to provide it in a way that's going to be, simple, explicit, and to the point as well. So, as much as...
And I guess that could be tricky because we know that using visual supports is often a really good way of learning for our family members. So I guess what sort of tips have you got or learnings have you, had along the way in terms of that side of things?
Absolutely. And I think it's one of those things, Tanya, that we need to start early. So, when we have conversations with our family members around educating our people with Down syndrome around some of those things, we do encourage to, start those conversations early. So whether that be, when it comes to things like puberty down the track when they are teenagers, to start talking about things, around body parts at an early age, as young as maybe, 1 or 2 years old. To really consolidate, using the word, the right and correct terminology for body parts, and identifying, when and when, in terms of public and private, in terms of those situations, when we would be referring to those particular body parts, and who we're comfortable in terms of, sharing some of those things with.
And that, I guess, is part of the trickiness, if we're going to use that word again, because sometimes people with Down syndrome might have an extra layer of people in their lives from an earlier age, such as support staff, helping with things like personal care or other sorts of, daily kind of tasks where I guess that, contact with someone who you're not terribly familiar with, who's helping you in that quite intimate personal way, I guess, does that play into even more the importance of teaching about, what is your body, who can have any contact with you in your body, and how you can communicate if you're not feeling comfortable with that contact?
I think particularly so in circumstances like that, particularly when we might have support workers, who may not be coming in on a regular basis in terms of the familiar people that we know, that, someone could be filling in for someone else for that day, and the person might need assistance with their personal care. And I think it's more around, how we can educate the person in terms of knowing what their boundaries are, what they're comfortable with in terms of, what's going to be happening, who's going to be, doing some of those things in terms of those support needs, and making sure that they're aware in terms of, the plans and what's going to be happening.
And I guess that's especially important to navigate if the person that support worker is supporting is not communicating via verbal channels. I guess, can you talk a little bit about those added layers of importance?
Yeah. And I guess it just comes to those basic communication needs in terms of how we would communicate with the person with a disability, regardless of whether they may or may not be, verbally be able to communicate, using visual prompts and visual aids in terms of the things that we're going to be doing, whether that be around personal care or anything else that we're, supporting the person to do. But it's just important that we're communicating, whether that be in various ways around our intentions as a support worker, letting us know when you're not feeling comfortable about something, and just letting them be aware in terms of what's going to be happening, and letting us know when we need to stop, or if you want us to do something a different way.
And I think that's really important from a young age too, isn't it, in terms of encouraging children to exercise that right to say no, because I think you said earlier the earlier the better to start with this. And I very much agree from my early years role. It's really important for children to feel respected and heard if they are uncomfortable with the situation and want to say no in that regard. Yuka, if you could share a little bit more about maybe what leads to that extra vulnerability.
And I think, Tanya, a lot of the times it's just about not knowing. So, you know, like we mentioned in terms of that trickiness of parents having that conversation with the person with Down syndrome around, you know, how they can you know, educate themselves around things like sexuality, puberty, and relationships. You know, I guess if we educate the person around some of those things on a regular basis, not just a one-off, we are empowering the person to be able to, you know, protect themselves within the community.
And I think that is definitely the key, isn't it? This is definitely not, I don't think for any young person, giving a book or a pamphlet or a one-off conversation is ever going to be enough in this area, but particularly when we know people with Down syndrome learn best through that repeated exposure to new information and opportunities to continue to explore it. Yeah,
absolutely.
Well, we would love to now share with you some wisdom from one of our peer leaders, Niky, who has explored this a lot in her own life over the years and was very passionate about sharing her wisdom around boundaries and how to navigate that amongst the various layers of people in your life. So we will now move over to that interview and share with you that wisdom. Hi, Niky. It's so wonderful to have you here today. For our listeners, I'd like you to know that this is Tanya from Down Syndrome Queensland Support Services team, and I'm talking today with Niky, who wears a few hats. She is our lovely admin assistant who's been here for a number of years, but today she's actually going to share some words of wisdom with us in her role as a peer leader in our new peer support network. So welcome, Niky.
Thank you.
Really excited to hear a little bit more today, and I believe you're going to have a chat for our listeners on the topic of boundaries.
I am.
What would you like to share?
Sure. The boundaries we need with people to understand is we need boundaries around us to protect us. There are 3 sets of boundaries. So the inner circle, people we love, we can hug. 2, the middle circle, people we meet or know a bit and we might just shake their hand or nudge them. In that outer circle, people we don't really know and should not touch, and they should not touch us.
So that's talking about all the different people you might know in your life?
Yeah.
Okay, and they fall into one of 3 circles.
Which is this.
So Niky's showing me a beautiful picture here. It's got 3 different layers, and the middle layer is people who you're really close with, Niky. Is that right? And the kinds of contact you might have with someone really close would be hugging, it says there. What about people in that next layer where they're not quite as close to you?
You mean in the middle?
The yellow layer that I can see there. Like, what kind of contact do we have with those people?
That's like a handshake or a nudge only.
Okay.
With people who don't want to hug you, just want to shake their hand or nudge them and just say, how are you and how was your day and everything like that.
So friendly but not super friendly.
Yeah.
And what about that last circle that you've got
The last
there?
one?
Yeah, the outside one. It was the red one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's not even as close again.
The outer circle, physical contact, is strangers, people you meet for the first time, your bus drivers, supermarket people, bank employees, other people who might meet for the first time.
Yeah, the people you don't know very well.
And
I wonder if you could take us through each of those again, because you've got some amazing notes there.
In the inner circle, people we love and can hug is your parents and grandparents, sisters and brothers, very, very close friends, nephews and nieces, aunts, uncles, cousins you see often, sister-in-laws and brother-in-laws. Sometimes you work friends, maybe.
Yeah. And even though they're people that you're really close to, is it okay if there's times where you don't want to hug them as well?
Same, but when I'm here at DSQ, sometimes I do.
Yeah.
Or don't, or they want to or not. So
Yeah. And it's your choice, isn't it?
it's my choice and their choice.
And is it hard to tell people if you're not comfortable having that close contact?
What do you mean?
Like if someone goes to give you a hug and you're not feeling like you would like that, I'm wondering what we could say to people. How do we get out of those situations?
The thing is, though, it's their decision to make. Do you want to hug you or not? So if I said yes and they say yes, then I can.
Yeah, yep. And if it looks like they don't want to, maybe we could ask permission first.
Yeah.
Is it okay if I give you a hug?
Yeah,
Or maybe we could say, today I'd rather just shake hands. Is that okay?
exactly.
Perfect. Great. So that was the inside circle. They were your really close people.
Yeah, or you're close to your family
Yeah.
and your aunties and uncles and cousins. Don't see them much often, but
Yeah.
you do. Or,
Yeah. People you're really connected to.
Yeah.
For other people who maybe don't know their workplaces that
Exactly.
well, would it be the yellow circle? I'm wondering about that next layer that you were talking about.
okay.
I can't remember who was on that list.
In the middle circle,
Yeah.
people you might handshake or nudge,
Yep.
like old school friends. You only see occasionally. Your support workers, maybe. Parents of your friends of your parents, people you work with,
Yeah.
or who knows.
Yeah. And maybe if you haven't worked for very long with them too.
Teachers, tutors, hairdresser, personal trainer, doctors, sport coaches, relatives you don't see very often.
Yeah. Yeah, that you might not feel as connected to. That's a great list. So that's more of you can still have a little bit of contact, but it's more that handshake or...
Handshake or a nudge. Even,
Yeah.
even if they want to hug you, they can just say yes, but you just never know.
Yeah. And do you sometimes look at their body language a little bit and see what they're thinking and whether they might be comfortable? Great. And I'm wondering if you can remind me again about that outside circle.
Yes.
The people that we just aren't going to have that physical contact with. I think you had it in a red circle.
The outer circle,
Yeah.
like strangers, people you meet for the first time.
Yep.
This contact. Bus drivers,
Yep.
supermarket people, bank employees, other people you might meet for the first time.
Yeah.
So,
So people we're really not that well known with, and maybe we may not ever see them again either. So
no.
thank you so much for sharing that, Niky. Was there anything else about boundaries that you would like to share?
I have one.
Sure.
When you work in an office, like when someone's working on events,
Yep.
like sometimes when teenagers can understand how the volunteers work.
Oh, volunteers, that's a great one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because they're not your regular worker, are they?
No.
But they're somebody that might be connected to your workplace, but you don't know them very well yet.
To tell to everyone about the teenagers and tell them that to set the boundaries of the volunteers. If they're working with you, just listen to them and they will tell you everything.
Do you think that was because sometimes the volunteers were of a similar age to the teenagers?
Yeah.
Or not much older?
Not much older, but they're still a good team of volunteers to work with and look after you and take care of what you need to do.
That can all still be part of the team. But so I'm just checking in to make sure I understood you correctly. Do you mean sometimes it might be confusing for younger people when their workmates or people supervising them might be of a similar age? It makes it harder to set those boundaries?
Yeah, it's a lot harder to set boundaries for the younger ones because they tend to walk over them, walk over and sit down with them and just
Yeah.
go all crazy about it.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that.
It's okay.
Did you have any other words of wisdom before we...
We're quiet.
Not quite. Thank you so much. We really appreciate all the learning that you've shared today. Thank you, Niky, for sharing those wonderful words of wisdom with us. And we do encourage everybody listening today to start those conversations early with their family members and continue to have them in ongoing and accessible ways. Yuka, I believe that you have had some experience with putting together and running workshops around this very topic in the past. I wondered if you could share a little bit more about what DSQ can offer in that regard.
So we can offer workshops to people with Down syndrome talking about healthy relationships, and that covers content like consent, which is really important, and just navigating relationships in general in terms of, positive relationships and how we communicate with the people in our life, and just covering some of those really important things that we would need to know in navigating relationships.
That sounds great. And so if people were interested in exploring that, they could just reach out to the office and contact you.
Yep, they sure can.
Lovely. If you have found today's episode confronting or difficult to listen to and would like to process that further, please do reach out to the support services team here at Down Syndrome Queensland on 07 3356 6655.
You have been listening to the Now and the Future podcast. For more information about this episode and many other topics relate to Down syndrome,
Please visit the Down Syndrome Queensland website at downsyndrome.org.au/QLD.
Down Syndrome Queensland, supporting people with Down syndrome now and into their future.